Is this the last week of the regular season in the ESPN league?
Yes.
Your league? Okay.
Yeah. It is.
Are you clinched? Like, are you locked in?
I think I am, but it's either I'll be 3 or 4.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh wow, it's top 4.
Yeah, it's top 4.
I'm looking at it right now. Wow. That's
so
you gotta
Chris
be good.
loses, I feel like, do you have a chance to get in?
I think I have a chance.
Okay.
I'm 7-5. Chris is 8-4. It looks like I have more points for, so I don't know. Did I beat him? I don't know. Who's Chris playing?
Chris is playing.
I'm playing him.
Yeah, you guys are playing.
Oh. All right, then.
Kind
of a bid week.
Yeah. All right, guys, with that, you guys know it's a big week for Bill and Fantasy. We're going to start talking about some Trek. Today it's episode 70. 70th episode of Trek Live. I couldn't think of a better topic to do the 70th episode. Bill, what are we talking about this morning?
We're going to talk about captain role reversals. So it comes up a lot, I think, in our conversations. We've kind of covered like little bits and pieces of this in smaller conversations. Like, how would Picard handle this situation or that situation? How would Cisco, handle something differently than Janeway? Like, these things come up a lot, and I think it's a good idea to like take that kind of idea and give it its own breathing room and kind of look at it more broadly. So yeah, we're going to look at the differences of the captains and some of the situations that maybe define them and how, other sensibilities. Each captain definitely has their own sort of personality and background and their own way of dealing with things sometimes. So I think it'll be interesting to look at, how maybe role reversals would have impact some of these shows or situations. There's a few of them that are really interesting to me, but I'm curious to see what you kind of bring to the table too. Some of them are the classic ones that always get brought up. Things like Cisco's stuff in the Pale Moonlight. Like, it's definitely interesting to think about how different captains would have handled something like that. So yeah, really looking forward to diving into that and seeing where the topic takes us. We haven't structured this much. We haven't talked a lot about like a system to kind of go through this. We're just going to make it like a casual conversation and just let it flow the way two guys sitting around talking about Star Trek would flow, naturally.
Yep.
We're just going to let the conversation go where it goes. And obviously, anybody out there in the chat, Jordan, Thad, I see you guys are both here.
Welcome, guys.
Counting on you guys. Yeah, welcome. Chime in. Tell us if we're right. Tell us if we're wrong. Tell us if we're missing an idea or one of these situations. If you want to talk about something, chime in. Let us know. Tell us what you think. Be a part of the conversation.
Yep. Before that, I'd like to jump into kind of where our rewatch is at. So, Bill, where is your rewatch at right now?
My rewatch is in the exact same place it was last week. I haven't watched anything yet. I'm hoping to today. I'm sitting at by any other name. So I have 5 episodes left in season 2 that I'm hoping to knock out today. Today and maybe into early part of next week. So I'm coming up on the end of season 2 of TOS, which is always kind of an interesting time for me. Season 3 is obviously like kind of like season 1 of TNG. People have a lot of strong feelings about season 3 of TOS. Not always positive, but it's an interesting season. I don't watch it, or I haven't watched it as much in my life. The classic episodes of the first 2 seasons I've seen many, many, many times, and there are episodes of season 3 that I've certainly seen a lot because I go through the whole thing often, but they're not episodes that when I'm in the mindset to kind of pinpoint and just pick out episodes to watch, I don't tend to hit. So season 3, while I'm not in love with the season as a whole, offers some interesting stuff because there are episodes I haven't seen quite as often as some others. Some of it's a little more fresh in that I don't have 100 viewings of the Doomsday Machine or the Trouble with Tribbles already in my backlog, and not bringing all that stuff to the table when I watch an episode like, say, The Lights of Zetar or The Empath. Episodes like that I don't watch a whole lot. So only when I'm kind of going through the whole thing. So I'm kind of looking forward to that. I always kind of do. It's a change of pace from the first 2 seasons where it's more populated with episodes that I've seen dozens and dozens of times since I've been, old enough to do anything. Yeah. Be myself, I guess. What about you? Where are you in your rewatch?
So I finally put some episodes down. I'm into season 5 of TNG. The one thing I noticed this time around going through TNG, I feel like I kind of ramp up towards the end and the beginning of seasons. And I think it would be a cool kind of show, maybe possibly down the future, to kind of go into kind of depth of season structure of different shows and what's easier to watch and stuff like that. So that's what I've kind of noticed. I had some heavy hitters in Redemption, Darmok and Ensign Rowe. Both to me all great episodes, some great Trek. So yeah, I'm liking TNG right now.
My first question to you is we talked a lot about season 3 of TNG as like a critical high point. We did a whole episode on it. It's kind of like the point in time where TNG found its sea legs and hit its stride. How do you think season 4 compares to season 3? Do you think season 3 is significantly better? Do you think it's fairly close? Like, do you have an opinion on?
I want to say I think they're similar. I think there are definitely some classics in each season, also mixed in with some, at least for me, run of the mill, like middle of the road episodes. Sure. So,
and I think that's probably the difference for me. I think season 3, I love both, and season 4 has a share of like some of the best of TNG in my mind. The Drumhead, the Wounded, Family. I love Remember Me, Reunion. Like there's a lot of classics in season 4, but I think there are probably more middle of the roadish, run of the mill kind of episodes in season 4 than maybe there are in season 2, or in season 3. I'm sorry. Season 3 might chug out more classics than 4. So if I had to pick between the two, they're both very high on my scale of Star Trek seasons, because I think they're both pretty consistent. But I think season 4 has a few more episodes in like the B to B minus to C plus kind of territory than,
if I remember correctly.
Yep. Not a whole lot of duds at all. Are there any episodes from the season that you kind of think back on that you would say was like that was a misfire, that was a bad episode? I know you weren't big on the host, at least when you were watching last week. I think you said it was kind of a struggle for you.
The host, at least that's what I can remember in kind of back a little bit. I just remember kind of stopping at mid-episode and being like, man, this is getting tough. I gotta push through it so I can get to some great episodes. But
yeah. Lights of Zetar was the episode from MIB2. Is that Men in Black 2? Am I misremembering Men in Black 2? Is there Star Trek in Men in Black 2?
I haven't seen Men in Black 1 or 2 in a long time.
Yeah, me neither. I've seen Men in Black a lot in my life, but I don't know if I've seen Men in Black 2 since it was out in theaters.
Yeah.
So refresh my memory. If Lights of Zetar made an appearance in that movie, it might be a reason to go back and watch that movie again. But it might. Yeah. It might. But how you doing, Matt Buck? Welcome.
Yeah, welcome.
What was I going to say about season 4 of TNG?
Episodes that aren't as hot as you.
Weren't as hot. We talked a lot about. You kind of made me interested to go back and. Cupid's an interesting one.
Yeah.
I think that's a hot and cold, depending on your taste and your patience with the silliness. If the sense of humor of Cupid lands for you, you're gonna like it. But I think it's flat for some. You made me interested to go back and watch Night Terrors again. I'm looking forward to getting to that. Your conversation about that episode kind of makes me want to take a fresh set of eyes to it. I think maybe I too easily fall into the the pattern of criticizing it because of the Deanna Troi stuff, the "Where Are You" stuff that we talked about when we talked about that episode.
Yeah.
I feel like I need to go back and like kind of judge it more fairly and not dwell too much on like a specific thing that drags it down for me. Like look at the whole a little more.
Because I feel like the Troy stuff is a little bit silly and a little bit dated.
Right.
But the other stuff, to me, it kind of fell perfectly because I was going through it, in October, and it was kind of frightening to me. Definitely roast me in the comments if you guys disagree. But yeah.
Jim Morehouse, Enterprise Extras here, and is saying that Night Terror's made an appearance on Top 5 Scary Episodes, and I need to give it another shot. And I do. I'm looking forward to hitting it down the road and giving it another fair look. But yeah, I'm glad you're in season 5. Season 5 is kind of loaded with classics too. I think it's kind of similar to 4 with a lot of high points throughout, but I don't know that it's as consistently like pumping out classics like season 3. I think season 3 might be a little unique in that way.
Yeah.
So I'm really curious to hear what you think. Can I ask you real quick what you thought of Darmok on this go around?
Loved it. I loved it before, and I loved it this. It's always a gut check when you realize that, I think it is really successful because I think they do build a relationship in that 45 minutes.
Yeah, they do.
And you do kind of feel a little bit bummed at the end. But I think it's cool to see another first contact that doesn't go as smooth
as planned.
As a lot of these go.
Yeah, and I think maybe that's an episode that you could use in this kind of conversation. Like, how would any of those other captains have been able to break through to Captain Dathan from Darmok? That might be a good segue. Let's just go right into our topic. We can start with this because it's an episode you just watched. Is Picard like uniquely suited to make that happen and break through with Dathan? Is he the only captain that was going to have that we've seen in the shows? Like, is he the only one that was going to have the patience necessary to establish that relationship and not get frustrated and successfully make first contact with those people?
I don't think so, because I feel like each captain does have their kind of own patience to different degrees, obviously. But I think that some captains might be more capable because they're able to think outside the box. I'm not saying that Picard isn't, but for me, I think that some of the other captains do possess that quality of kind of thinking outside the box. Like, okay, this traditional first contact is not going to work here. We got to go a different route. So
yeah, I guess when I think of, I agree. I think that episode could work with any of those other shows.
Yeah.
I think there's a case to be made that any of those captains could get there.
Yeah.
But for me, when I think of like, okay, look at the Star Trek captains, which one is like the diplomat, like the tried and true trained person to handle these situations? It's Picard is the one that's like the classic character that's like built for this specific kind of deal, where I think it may have been a bigger challenge. It was certainly a big challenge for Picard. This is not an easy thing. Like this is a big achievement for him. And that one of the reasons that episode works so well is it feels like a big achievement. Like it feels like a breakthrough and something that Picard is kind of like exhilarated. When he breaks through and makes contact and he figures out like, this is how I need to communicate with this guy. Like Patrick Stewart's awesome in that scene where he's like really excited. Like there's a threat happening. This thing's about to attack him. But he doesn't really care about that in that moment. All he cares about is he just communicated with this guy, like against all odds.
Yeah.
It's a big challenge, and Picard, gets there. But I do think, Janeway. I can envision Janeway getting to do that and figuring it out. Matt Buck mentioned Archer. Perhaps, absolutely. I think Archer maybe has the most time of the bunch, just because he has the least amount of experience with alien species. Certainly, I think he would have the zeal for it, like the patience and the desire to like make it work, because especially early Archer is like, very gung-ho about doing these kinds of things. So I think he would certainly put the effort in, but I think Picard is uniquely trained, uniquely suited to do it, to to make it happen.
Yeah.
But that's certainly like an episode, and there all these episodes where the captains are put in unique and challenging situations. You can have this kind of conversation with any of them. Like, how would a different captain handle that?
Right.
I feel like Darmok was as good an example as any to kind of uncrack.
Yeah.
Are there other situations that kind of come immediately to mind for you? Like, what's the first thing that pops into your head when you think about this kind of
I guess I'll just stick with Picard. I think that his kind of situation in his command gets overlooked because I feel like some of these captains might not fit in his position because he is much more like, when I think of him, it's much more like an administrative, you're on the flagship, you got to look good, it's a tough situation, and I think a lot of people forget that that's a tough command also. It's a lot of pressure to be professional and
be the standard bearer.
Yeah, exactly.
Federation.
Exactly.
When because he's the captain of the flagship and he's sort of at the top of the call sheet for the whole Starfleet. When they have a tough job to do, when there's a tough negotiation or a tough, there's a ton of episodes I feel like in TNG. And I'm probably exaggerating. There's maybe not a ton, but I feel like there's a handful where the Enterprise D gets sent to a planet to kind of close the deal on like wrapping in somebody into the Federation, or trying to determine if somebody's application for the Federation is going to be accepted, and they're kind of leaving it up to Picard to kind of make a recommendation and go out there and go to the planet and visit it. He's the closer. Like he's going to be the one that's going to be out in the front lines, figuring out, do these people, are they there yet? Have they achieved what they need to achieve in order to be a part of this greater thing? That's certainly unique to Picard because he's the captain of the flagship, because he's so experienced. He's not, out on the skirts of Federation space exploring or, captain of a space station in a critical situation. Like that has its own set of, but Picard, certainly has his own problems as the standard bearer for the Federation, and the poster boy kind of. I think that gives him a unique need to uphold all those ideals and not break with the sort of traditions and the policies of Starfleet and the Federation. Yeah. Where some of those other captains maybe are in situations where you might have a little bit more leeway to skirt issues.
Yeah. So if I were to kind of do a role reversal to kind of who would fit better, like fit, similar to Picard, I think Janeway, early Janeway, even, throughout the, her whole command, her ideals are put to the test and she has to uphold them to a Picard standard, and I think she does. In some situations, others
she compromises where she needs to.
Yeah.
And I think she probably the thing that separates her from Picard, but it's all situational, like she's in a completely different situation than Picard. But yeah, there are instances where she'll buck those policies a little bit, but she's alone and completely removed and has no resources to fall back on, where Picard is in a completely different situation. But I agree with you. I think she's probably the most equipped to be that diplomat. I think if her career could have taken her to a point where Picard was, if her career was a little different, if she wasn't spending 7 years in the Delta Quadrant and getting promoted to Admiral at the end of the day when she gets back. Evidently shown in Nemesis, and she's an Admiral now. I could see her as somebody who could be like the captain of a flagship, especially after what she was through in Voyager, if things played out that way. Her set of experiences and I think she says it through the show, but I think if you could talk to Captain Janeway in the real life, in the fictional universe of Star Trek, in the post returning home kind of situation, I envision her kind of like crediting getting home to those Starfleet principles and Federation ideals. Like, I think she would say that the reason they got through it and the thing that kept them together and kept them moving in the right direction was sticking to those principles and not going the Maquis way and not going the Equinox way. Like Equinox didn't get back, and Equinox was a mess because they didn't stick to the script and didn't stay true to the principles and the foundation that got humanity to where they are in the 21st century. Where Voyager and that crew, because of Janeway's dedication to those ideals, made it. That's what got them back. So that sort of background and that dedication to them and that tried and true, like, I tested it. I've been through hell and back, and what got me through it was this set of rules and regulations and principles would make her later in life, I think, suited to do things like Darmok in Captain Picard's shoes.
Yep.
So I agree with you there. I think she's probably the closest to Picard's role. And another captain that I think is kind of close that we saw very little of. I think the closest thing to like another version of a Picard style of person that we've seen is Captain Georgiou at the beginning of Discovery. Yes. I think she's like a Picard-like figure in that period of time. Very principled, very clearly like bought into that philosophy and that set of principles. I think that was a conscious effort on the part of the creative team at Discovery this is a Picard-like figure more so than maybe a Kirk-like figure or Sisko or Janeway. Right? Like this is a Picard kind of person. So yeah. Are there other episodes of TNG that you think, like other situations, I should say, that Picard has been through that you think like are classic examples of like that's a Picard kind of dilemma and that's an interesting thing to think about? Another captain, how they would handle a situation like that. Sort of like Darmok is.
Yeah.
Not to put you on the spot. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I guess I have to look through the episodes, but I don't know. Is there one that jumps out to you, or
the one you're about to watch? I think would be an interesting Silicon Avenue. That's an episode where they come across the crystalline entity again, and they're dealing with this dilemma of like how to deal with this like massive thing that you can't communicate with in any kind of easy way, kind of like Darmok. That they're kind of presented with this choice: do we destroy this thing because it's dangerous and it's hurting people and everything it comes across? It's kind of like absorbing everything, and I think he compares it at one point to like it destroys life the same way that like a whale on Earth would destroy like plankton. Like it's just living and doing what it has to do to survive. Like it has no idea what it's doing. It's acting instinctively. And Picard doesn't want to jump to destroy it. He wants to try to communicate with it and try to break through to it. He's got to convince people.
If I remember right, isn't it like it's similar to Drumhead that like some expert will come on the ship and be like, we got to do this or exactly.
It's one of those kinds of stories, but it's an episode where Picard is kind of in a position where he has to, he has a set of principles and he has something that like his instincts and his training are telling him he's got to lean this way towards not destroying this thing. Very Roddenberry kind of sensibilities, and he's getting pushback for it. And I think episodes like that are kind of unique to Picard, where he's often put in these situations where other captains may be more quick to pull the trigger on take care of something that's going to pose a threat to not only his ship, but after it destroys the Enterprise, it's probably going to go to the next planet it finds and cause havoc there. And that kind of pressure, I think, might push other captains, Sisko, Kirk, Archer, all of them really, into saying enough's enough. This thing's got to go, and putting their efforts into making that happen instead of communicating with it, trying to communicate with it. What other dynamics, other captain situations come sort of immediately to mind to you as interesting food for thought for a topic like this?
I think that I'd like to spend some time on Sisko's command and his situation, because his is definitely unique. I mean, they're all kind of unique in their own way.
Sure.
But I think Sisko, similar to Janeway, definitely has a more difficult time, in my opinion. I'd love to hear your guys' thoughts. I think we've done an episode on toughest commands, but So I guess Cisco definitely came to mind.
Yeah, I think we talked just a few weeks ago when we had the other Dan talking about his first impressions of these other shows. He talked a lot about Deep Space Nine, and we got into this kind of conversation. The classic one, like I said at the beginning of the show, was kind of the In the Pale Moonlight example.
Yeah.
Where Cisco, has to buck his principles and go against the grain and go against everything that his training tells him is the right thing to do.
Right, yeah.
In a sort of critical do or die kind of situation. He sees the writing on the wall, and the responsibility is kind of falling on, I don't know about falling on him. Then I don't know that any other captain gets there the way that Cisco does.
Right.
In the Pale.
Right.
Like, do you see any other captain, deciding to play the same game that Cisco did?
I don't want to bring your beloved Enterprise into this.
Mm-hmm. Fair enough.
But yeah, I feel like Archer, when he unbuttons his undershirt, I feel like, if I were to, again, if we're comparing commands and who would be a good fit into that kind of situation, I feel like Archer is that kind of Cisco-esque character where he can, go into a situation that's, a little heated, a little dangerous, and take care of business.
Yeah. I think Archer came the closest to doing things the same way that Cisco kind of did in the Pale Moonlight in an episode like Damage and Enterprise in season 3, where he kind of is in a do or die situation. He's got to get to this rendezvous to find out critical information about the Xindi and start taking care of business on that mission. And goes to a pretty dark place and boards a ship and steals a warp coil, critical component to making the ship go in order to get there. And he wrestles with it just like Cisco does, and he gets to the same place ultimately. He can live with it, like Cisco says at the end of In the Pale Moonlight. He can live with it, and that is maybe the scariest thing, that he can live with it.
Yeah.
But so I think Archer's probably the one that has kind of been to that place where we've seen them need to do that.
Yep.
Where I think Janeway wouldn't, because Janeway never quite gets there, in her critical, defining 7-year saga.
Multiple situations, I should say.
Yeah, she's been in. She certainly bucks the Prime Directive on occasion and twists it and stretches it to the point. Yeah, she does play fast and loose with the Prime Directive at times, but she never quite, like we were just talking about, like she is dedicated to those principles, and I can't see her, going that far like Cisco and Archer did. I just don't see it. Like there are situations where she's really in kind of the same situation. Like you're mentioning Archer is kind of having me lean that way a little bit for a second here. But there are episodes of Voyager where she easily could have done what Archer did in that situation. Go, find a ship and try to negotiate for something and kind of take it whether they want to or not. If you need something in order to keep going. I think of an episode like The Void, which I love from Voyager, where she's in a situation where she needs supplies and needs resources in order to keep going, and decides to form a little mini federation instead of getting into this dark place of stealing technology and pawning things off of others. I think I can't see Janeway making the same choices Archer and Cisco did.
Yeah,
I think she is not to say like overly dedicated, but I think her buy-in to those principles is so strong and so dedicated that she would find another way.
Yeah,
at all costs.
Yeah, I will say that I guess in my mind, being a captain is you. At the end of the day, you're the one who has to make those tough decisions, and I think that each captain is different in their own way, and what decisions they're going to make and stuff like that. So,
yeah, absolutely, yeah, and that's kind of the most interesting thing about this topic to me is that all these characters are so well developed, and we've seen them all go through like really difficult situations and come through these situations in their own sort of unique ways.
Mm-hmm.
That there's enough there to like dive into a topic like this and have enough background on each of these characters to kind of imagine how they would do in different scenarios and how their background of experiences would, you know, sway them in these different kinds of situations. Like a better word. You know, my dad's in here, for those who know the name similarity there. He's mentioning Janeway, and I think you got to talk about Janeway. I'll go back to Cisco, but we kind of skirting into Janeway anyway, and that's definitely one that I'm really eager to kind of talk about because the whole show of Voyager's kind of built around this situation. Is there a captain that you think would have either thrived in or, you know, fit the best into that Delta Quadrant stranded alone kind of situation the way Janeway did? Like who would have done the best in that kind of situation? Other than
I think a lot of the captains would be able to kind of thrive in there. The first ones that come to mind are Kirk and I guess Archer, because I feel like similar to Janeway, Archer is going into like undiscovered territories. And
for sure.
Yeah. As far as Kirk goes, I like Kirk because he is kind of like a calculated gunslinger. He does, you know, he has that ability to kind of weigh the situation with Spock and McCoy, you know, the big three, but also is not afraid to take risks and stuff like that. So I think he could kind of thrive in that situation as well.
I think so too, and I think the other thing that both of those captains have in common is being like earlier in the life of Starfleet. And like when I think of the original series and Kirk, I think one of that the original series does pretty well is they kind of in Enterprise obviously is like very much built around this same idea that, you know, when the Enterprise is out there, help is not always right around the corner. Like they're kind of alone on an island in a similar kind of way. Like I think the original series does a pretty good job of making space feel really big.
Yes.
And that they're really pushing outward on the Enterprise. So I think, and they're on a 5-year mission. You know, the idea of that 5-year mission, understood it, is that they weren't really coming home. Like they're out there for 5 years exploring space and you know, within like Federation space and pushing outside of Federation space to explore. But nevertheless, like out there on a long term mission. Where like the Enterprise D with Picard, it's you know, you get the impression that they're a little more close to home and kind of
there's a Starbucks just around the corner, you know.
You get the sense that it's a little smaller, it's a little bit more of a lived in comfortable environment, you know, the Alpha Quadrant. So I think Kirk is maybe uniquely suited because of that 5-year mission and what the original series is kind of portraying that space exploration to be. And Archer, of course, because he's the first out there. You know, Archer doesn't have the 200 years of Starfleet history to kind of read about and see other mistakes.
He's writing the book.
He's writing.
He's not writing.
Exactly.
He's not reading. He's writing.
And he's making the mistakes that other captains are going to learn from and reference in their own experiences.
Yeah.
So part of me says Archer could maybe do it, but Archer could just as well, you know, get blown up like very quickly on in that mission because he doesn't, you know, have the experience to be out there completely.
On the principles.
Or have to compromise on the principles because the principles are still new and being developed. You know, they're not tried and true yet. There may be things that he wants to, you know, establish and live by, but they're not tested yet. And when your back's against the wall and you're in a difficult situation, it's probably easier to compromise. So, you know, I think Archer's experience being alone and doing the Xindi mission and being out there, he's very much alone in that. You know, he's got no help and he's out in completely unexplored territory. It's a much shorter period of time. And it's a much more like, you know, targeted, defined mission. Like we have to go do this thing at all costs. Where you know, Voyager's more, you know, I guess theirs is too getting home, but they're on a time crunch on Enterprise. I think Archer had some similar experiences that might have shown that he could maybe do it. but he would have challenges too. Where I think Kirk could have done it.
Great question, Matt.
Great question. Any excuse to think about a night in sick bay is great. Not. But no, his lionfish may have. His lionfish is much more uniquely suited to defend.
Yeah.
Like Porthos was.
Yes.
I think the lionfish would have been fine. So yeah, I think Sisko's decision in the Pale Moonlight would kind of indicate that maybe he would have skirted those principles a little more often than Janeway. I think he probably compromises a little bit more. But I think Sisko is in his own unique situation. We kind of started talking about this before we went on the Janeway train, but we talked about this with Dan, the other Dan, when he was here a couple weeks ago. Obviously Sisko's in a unique situation where he is stuck in one place. Unlike these other captains, he doesn't come across a problem, kind of put a Band-Aid on it, try to get them into a better place, and then fly off and say, "See ya, good luck."
Yeah.
When Sisko's dealing with a problem, that problem is staying right there with him, or is likely to come back around very soon.
Mm-hmm.
Like he's dealing with local issues that are kind of baked into his whole dynamic. So I think that sort of experience and that situation probably bakes in this different set of principles. Like the experience of seeing the fallout of your choices and the way you try to handle a problem makes you make different decisions. It's probably easier to maybe stick to your principles a little bit. These sorts of principles, if you can maybe fly off and move on to the next thing and leave the problem for somebody else to come clean up. So yeah, I don't know. I don't know if other captains would have adopted some of this thinking that if they were put in a position where they had to stay in one place and deal with problems.
Yeah, exactly.
The same way.
Most of this is just speculation, but it's fun to talk about. You don't really know how they would kind of act in the situation in that moment. So
yeah,
we're not trying to criticize any situation.
Yeah. The fact is,
right.
These are all fictional characters who did what the writer told them to do.
Yep.
But I think because we love Star Trek and we think Star Trek's great, the writers did a good job crafting characters that have enough background and have enough to chew on to have these kinds of conversations and kind of imagine how different things would play out in different situations if you reverse the roles like we're trying to do. Is there a captain that you think would have thrived the best in Sisko's shoes?
Yes. I think he would thrive because it's mischievous. Maybe, I don't know. Maybe that's a little bit too premature to say he would thrive, but I think he might fit well as well. I also think Picard would fit well in kind of the other side of the coin that, he is the diplomat. This is a big diplomatic kind of situation that goes throughout all 7 seasons. Yeah,
definitely.
I think he would fit great.
I think Picard would too in a lot of these sort of pre-war situations. I have a hard time imagining, and it's just we never really. The Next Generation is not a show that leans heavily into combat situations, wartime kinds of deals where Deep Space Nine's obviously going there often, kind of lives there at the end. Enterprise goes there. Voyager finds itself in these kinds of situations. So you see those captains dealing with combat situations pretty often. But especially pre-war, when the job that Sisko's kind of tasked with is dealing with the Bajorans and kind of bringing them along and helping them through the cleanup of the occupation and trying to kind of bridge a gap between the Bajorans and the Cardassians and trying to build that relationship up so that it's not a destabilizing force in the quadrant. Like that's kind of Sisko's job, especially in the beginning part of Deep Space Nine. And I think Picard probably is uniquely suited to do that. Sisko had Starfleet backup. Janeway did not. No other captains for the crew without Starfleet chiming in. It's true, but Sisko also, he's kind of on an island. He's far away. That's a tucked away corner of Federation space. He's not like Picard, flying around Federation space where, like you said, there's a Starfleet base right around the corner. Especially in early Deep Space Nine. I think early Deep Space Nine does a pretty good job of making Deep Space Nine feel like an island pretty far out there, like in the deepest reaches of space. And
deep space.
Deep space is not right around the corner all the time. I think once the war gets going and it becomes like this hub of activity and it's a big strategic point. Yeah, of course, there's Starfleet everywhere. And he does have a lot of backup and a lot of things to lean on because he's in the kind of heat of the battle. Where of course Janeway is completely on her own. She's the extreme of that example. If you're talking about alone in the outer reaches of space, I think the closest thing to Janeway really is Kirk in the original series. I think if you're really talking about like completely kind of alone with help not around the corner, I think TOS does the best job of conveying that sense, like I was saying before. More so than any of the other shows. You know, Archer did kind of always have the option. At least Archer had the option to. There's not a whole lot of Starfleet to call back on. He didn't like doing it. The option was always there to like, okay, hail Vulcan, and they'll be right here. They'll help you out. Like that's kind of always lingering in the background, especially in the first 2 seasons. He never wants to do it because he's prideful and he doesn't really care to have their help. He wants to do it himself, but that option's always there. He has that save if he needs it, that rescue. Where Janeway and Kirk, to another extent, really, really don't most of the time. But yeah, the Lorca idea is kind of interesting. Lorca would thrive, especially in later Deep Space Nine. He's at home on the Discovery in wartime. Like that's his jam. He's happy in those kinds of situations. He's used to that. He knows how to rally the troops and be in those combat situations. And he would have gone to some dark places. You know, we think Sisko made some questionable decisions. You know. Lorca would have stopped at nothing to win. So, I that would have been an interesting thing to see. I would love to see a Jason Isaacs
Deep Space Nine
version in Deep Space Nine. That in that kind of situation, that would be an interesting thing to see. And Deep Space Nine has like this easy access to the mirror universe. They go there every year.
That's why I said it. I think that
they're dealing with it. Good.
I mean, this I feel like Deep Space Nine is a show, like the other shows to me are, some of the issues are kind of black and white. This show is kind of built on this gray area. And when I think of a character that is more gray area than probably any other character ever, maybe the ones on Deep Space Nine, I think Lorca would fit right in.
He is. He is. I'm kind of watching. I kind of lied when I said I haven't really watched much in the beginning of the show with the rewatch. I haven't watched a lot of TOS, but I did just recently get the Discovery Blu-ray, so I have been watching some Discovery. And Lorca is a fascinating character. He really, really is. He gets better with time. There's so much texture to him. The benefit of hindsight makes Jason Isaacs' performance all the better. Like there's so many little hints and so many little character moments that pop when you know what he's doing and why he's there and what his ultimate goal is. And it's complicated. He's a complicated guy. I'm really looking forward to that. I'd love to hear your take, like with some time between watching Discovery for the first time when it was airing and kind of revisiting it with the benefit of some time away from it and knowing where it's going. I'd be curious to hear what you had to say. Lorca is an interesting kind of character with a lot of these situations, but Sisko's situation I think would be kind of late Sisko, goateed, bald Sisko. Lorca fits right into that role, and I think would betray you in the end.
For the Dominion. The Dominion War went a little bit differently with Lorca in command.
He would do something terrible at the end. But he would make it an interesting show. Any other kinds of situations that would any other captain have done what Kirk did in Star Trek 3? Like throw the career away to save a friend, the way that Kirk did. For a chance at saving a friend.
I think Janeway would. I think Archer would. Yeah, I think it's definitely possible. I don't think the other captains would have done it with like the swag and the confidence and the swagger that Kirk does it at. Which I think, I don't know. I could go on a rant about Star Trek 3. It's underrated, I think, in my opinion. But
definitely.
Yeah. I think that a few people would.
I think a few people would too. I could see Archer doing it. I could see Janeway doing it. Sisko, I could probably see doing it. He has his battles with Starfleet and is ready to retire from Starfleet and live on Bajor at the end of the show. Like, I don't think he sees himself as like a long-term Starfleet officer, like deep into life. Like he has a plan for post Starfleet life. You know, I think given the right kind of situation, I can see him risking it all and laying it all on the line to save Jadzia Dax or something. Like if there was a chance to bring her back somehow, I could see him stopping at nothing. But yeah, Kirk, that's, I think, kind of maybe Kirk's defining choice. That is like his, like Janeway and Sisko have these like big situations that their whole shows are built on. Like this is their thing, you know, and they have other little things throughout, of course. Like there are episodes where Janeway or Sisko, like in the Pale Moonlight, or you know, Tuvix, you know, where the captains are like put in this impossible decision, and they do, and you can kind of try to role reverse all kinds of things to see what other characters would do. But those two characters, and Archer even too, have these like bigger situations that they have defining them. Whereas Kirk, maybe not so much, like a big picture thing, but his defining little moment, I think, is Star Trek 3, where he does something that might be, like you said, uniquely Kirk. The way he does it with swagger and confidence and not really looking back at all. Like he doesn't really hesitate too much. I was thinking of that scene where he's talking to the Admiral in the lounge. The Admiral's telling him, yeah, you're not going to do this. And Kirk just kind of phases out. And all he's thinking about is how.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, he's putting the pieces together right there, and that's it. Like there's
got the leather jacket on. He's just ready to go.
Nope. It's a done deal.
Yeah.
Where I think some of those other characters who would have done it may have struggled with Kirk did. So, yeah. Any other things you want to kind of throw out there as a?
I don't think so.
We kind of bounced around a lot. We covered, I think, everybody. It was not a very structured conversation, but I think it was pretty naturally flowing, like two guys talking about Star Trek would be, you know, like we are. And I think we covered a lot of ground. We talked about Picard and Darmok and Silicon Avatar, which you're about to watch, and you know, Archer's whole situation. Picard, Janeway. I don't think we missed anybody. Georgiou's name came up. We talked about Lorca. I think pretty soon here in a few months, I think we'll have enough of Pike. In season 2 of Discovery, where Pike will have enough like meat to chew on. That if we did this topic again down the road, I think Pike might factor into that conversation. You know, in a meaningful way. I get the impression that he's a pretty big deal too. So.
Yeah, you mentioned Pike. That brought up kind of the Kelvin timeline, and I'm just trying to think of how it's been, like how a captain would handle that. But to me, that's a really unique situation and a unique story to Kirk and the original series. So I don't know. What's a Kelvin timeline example? Something like this. I don't know. I guess maybe like if you wanted to stretch, you know, the way that Pike kind of coddles Kirk into giving him a chance. You know, like Kirk, I'm thinking of the scene like early in the movie when they're warping to Vulcan and Janeway, or when Kirk rushes onto the bridge and is like giving his spiel about, you know, this is not good. This is an attack. You know, he knows what's going to happen. And he's not supposed to be there. And the easy thing to do is throw him in the break. Like he doesn't belong here. He's suspended. He's not allowed to be here. But Pike not only doesn't do that, he puts him on the away team to go down to the drill to try to knock it out when the time comes. Like most captains, I think, probably don't do that. But that's a unique situation. Like Pike knows Kirk. He knows like his background and where he came from, and trusts him. So I think that's an example of a kind of situation. But I think probably a little too like specific to know like what anybody else would do. Definitely.
But it's the first thing that popped into my head about like a kind of a big decision that a captain made in that universe in the Kelvin timeline. I mean, Kirk, I guess, in Into Darkness, laying his the ship at the end, like he does do that. I mean, he it's a controversial moment in the movie, and it's a controversial thing. But at the end of the day, he does kind of without hesitation. He goes into that chamber knowing what's going to happen, and there's not a whole lot of hesitation there. He does it, and I don't know would all these other captains lay their life down to save their ships? I think they probably would.
Save the crew.
Save the crew. I think that's what it ultimately comes down to. Yeah. And that's like Kirk does it in Into Darkness, I think. Like my read on that has always been like there's that big speech that Khan gives about, I would do anything for my family. What would you do for yours? Yeah. And gets Kirk thinking, and he's in the situation, and he makes his choice. And that's kind of the moment where Kirk realizes that his crew is his family, and that kind of connects it to me as far as like, I always kind of talk about Star Trek, all these shows, the thing that kind of like the thread that puts them all together is it's about a family wherever you are, like people coming from all walks of life, becoming a cohesive unit who care about each other and respect each other's differences and work well together. And that moment in Into Darkness is kind of the moment where Kirk realizes that that's what it's all about. Yeah. And I think all those other captains would do it because Kirk's just figuring it out where all these other captains kind of are, like I think they would all do it in the if the situation really called for it. So Janeway does it in Year of Hell, actually.
Yes.
She kind of does.
Sacrifices it all.
Yep.
With the locket.
Yes. Absolutely.
Yep. Any Star Trek content? Podcasts, YouTube videos?
I did listen to Delta Flyer. The Threshold conversation was really good, really witty, really funny, and entertaining. I highly recommend that podcast, and that episode is a great entry point. I would say, if you want to be sold on that podcast, I think Threshold is a great episode to dive into. It's a really entertaining conversation. I don't know if Jim's still hanging around here. I'm a couple episodes behind on the show. Or one, I guess, the most recent episode I have not gotten to quite yet. But I mentioned on the last one, the episode titles I listened to about a week ago, and the Voyager Guilty Pleasures were awesome. So throw some love your way because you were here.
I will do the same. I am caught up on Trek Ranks. Nice. Bottle Show's episode was great. That's the one. It was just recent. Yeah, all great.
Yeah. I'm trying to think.
There is a primitive culture that I want to kind of listen to. It kind of talks about, at least kind of the description that I have, kind of in my queue. It's kind of about how, again, Bill and I talk about this, about how Star Trek is so versatile and they're, how they tell stories and episodes and stuff like that. So that's definitely one that's on my list.
Yeah, the Mad Generation is a fairly, I don't know if it's a new podcast, but I don't think many people know about it. I have not listened to it yet, but some guy who lives in my house with me keeps talking about it. So one of these days I'll give it a try.
Yep.
Put it in the arsenal of dozens and dozens of Star Trek podcasts. Yeah. There's an episode of Shuttlepod, which is the TrekMovie.com podcast. I haven't listened to it yet, but I'm interested to. It's comedic Trek, and it's something we actually kind of talked about. We haven't really dived into much about the concept of the animated series that was announced a few weeks ago. There's not much to talk about yet.
Yeah.
But one of these weeks we're going to have to unpack that and talk about what that kind of means and where we stand on where that could go. But they did an episode on comedic Star Trek, and kind of with that is like the nucleus of that conversation. How often has Star Trek really been funny, and what are the most successful attempts at comedic Trek? So I'm looking forward to getting that, and that's a conversation I'd like to have with you at some point, actually.
Yeah.
Funny
maybe
Star Trek.
A future episode, definitely.
Absolutely. Yeah. And there was a new commercial. There's a new TV spot that just dropped days ago for season 2 of Discovery. It's like just 30-second spot. Have you seen it?
Yeah, I've seen it.
Yeah, cool. Apparently, I didn't catch it, but apparently even like during football on Sunday, I think it was on.
Mm-hmm.
Like if you're watching CBS football, apparently it popped on once or twice.
Yeah.
So I guess they're starting to ramp up with that. Maybe we'll see a little bit more preview kind of content in the next few weeks as we get closer to the premiere. But there's some cool stuff in that. It looks really good. I'm excited, as always, for more Discovery. And we're not that far off. It's like 7 weeks, I think, at this point. And Thursday night, there's another short trek about Saru's background and where he came from. And then there's one more of them in early January. And then like a couple weeks after that is the first episode of the season. So, and we have, unlike last year, it's 13 straight weeks. It's no break.
No breaks.
No,
that should be fun.
Yeah, it's gonna feel old fashioned with like pushing through and having like an extended period of like new track. Really looking forward to it. So that's gonna pretty much, I think, pretty well define our winter into spring here on Trek Live.
Will be heavy Discovery content. Bill and I are probably gonna rewatch it before the season, so kind of expect that into December. As far as Trek Live content and discussion, I guess we'll start winding down the episode 70. You guys know the drill. The discussion doesn't have to stop here. Let us know if you want us to do kind of a little mini series on this topic we did today, where we can kind of analyze each situation specifically and go, into depth of whatever that entails.
That's true. Any of these kinds of situations, especially the smaller ones, like what Janeway did in Tuvix, it'd be interesting to talk about, like what would other captains do in that kind of situation? Which ones would have made the same choice as Janeway? Which ones maybe wouldn't have? So there's definitely all kinds of interesting topics floating around the Star Trek universe that are kind of offshoots of this more broad conversation. So
All right. We will be back next week to kind of talk about more Trek to be determined. This has been episode 70. Thank you guys all for watching. Matt Buck, I think, is a new Trek Live crew member, so definitely show him some love. We'll see you guys next week.
Yeah, thanks for watching.